Good morning, everybody. This is Victoria, your dog guru, and today we're answering more of your questions. Our first one's coming all the way from the sunny state of California, and Samantha writes, how do I pick a vet for my dog? I have a new puppy and I'm not really sure what I should be looking for or avoiding. Please help. All right, Samantha. Well, congratulations on your new puppy. And you have a really great question. So there's a handful of things that I look for in every vet before I ever admit my dog to the hospital, or heaven forbid we have an accident or some sort of serious situation where we need to know the staff in advance and really have trust and faith in that process. The first thing you want to do is you want to find a vet that's pretty close to you. The closer the better, because when an emergency, especially a puppy emergency, comes up, you don't always have a lot of time to get the problem addressed. So that's the first thing. The next thing you want to do is go ahead and take a drive on through and go by and visit the place. Not when you have an appointment, just completely randomly walk in and chat with the staff for a second or two. Yes, they're busy, but if you have any specific questions, this is a great time to ask, because the people in the front usually can direct you to not only your answers, but sometimes they can go back and ask a nurse if you have more specific questions. While you're there, though, there's a few things to keep in mind. First of all, do they have a sick dog area and a well dog area? Do they split them up? That's something to be mindful of, especially when you do have a puppy, because diseases can get transferred, and usually it happens from paws on the floor or it's airborne. There are other ways that dogs can get sick, but those are the two most common. So if they have their office split into two areas, like a well area and a sick area, that's ideal. The next thing you're going to want to pay attention to is, does it have an odor? A good, well-maintained office should not have an odor. They should also be willing to let you take a peek, since you won't have your dog on you, take a peek in the back to see where they kennel dogs when they're sick. I know when I was working at a vet clinic, we did this with everybody. We wanted them to see where their dog was going to be after we triaged them, or perhaps if they were awaiting vaccines or gone for an afternoon while they were healing and coming out of anesthesia. So whatever the case was, we had an open door policy about showing people where the patients would be. The next question, and it might seem somewhat obvious, is how many vets are they actually staffing at that facility? Some places have one vet, some places have 6 vets. So the more staff they have, the more opportunity there is for two things to happen. First of all, the likelihood of them being able to take you same day is a lot higher if there's a larger number of vets. The flip side of that, though, is that you might not get your quote-unquote normal vet. So if you want a one-on-one, more personalized experience and always know who you've got in, unless, of course, they're sick, then you might go with a smaller facility where there's only 1 or 2 vets. The next thing I always pay attention to is, how is the front of house staff? Do they seem like they're friendly and open and perhaps answering calls while you're there and being really kind to people on the phone? This is important. You know, the front of house staff can really ruin a good practice. So if you have nice people at your office on the front of house, it's just going to be an overall easing experience for you. It's already going to be stressful that you're bringing your dog in for something, even if it's just shots, because you're going to know that the dog is stressed. So having people who are super dog friendly and animal friendly, who smile when you come in and call you when the dog comes out of anesthesia and give you updates, that's a very valuable commodity, especially when there are a million vets out there who are excellent. But if their front of house staff is who you're going to be dealing with for the bulk of your time, then it's going to be a no-go sooner or later. You're going to get frustrated because they haven't called you back, or maybe you're getting frustrated because you just don't really get the warm, fuzzy feeling. So just make mental notes on what the front of house staff is like. You can also ask, and usually you might want to schedule a short appointment for this, but to meet with the vet and a nurse without your animal, without an appointment on the books for your actual pet. A lot of vets do this. It's not usually talked about super widely, but it's about 10 minutes of an appointment, and you can get familiarized with the vet as an individual and get an idea of what their back of house staff is like. You know, a nurse is who's going to be handling your dog quite a lot. While they look them over, usually they're taking notes. They're usually the ones recording information. So having a nice nurse can make what's a stressful experience a lot more pleasurable. My next piece of advice is ask them whether it's the nurse or the vets, because the nurses typically know. And you need to know when shots are going to be due. So if you need to make an appointment that day for a week from then, you'll already have it on the books and you're not going to be worrying at the last minute that you can't get an appointment. You can also ask at that point what kind of vaccines that they give besides the standard puppy shots, because this can vary from clinic to clinic. It can also vary from area geographically to another area, because some things you see more outbreaks in one area than another area. So there are some things that you vaccinate down for in Florida, but you wouldn't necessarily vaccinate for in North Carolina. So just to give you an idea about that. One other thing you could ask is, do they have an on-site pharmacy? Not all vets do, but if they have an on-site pharmacy as well as an on-site lab, that can shave off a lot of time that you could be playing a waiting game trying to get results back and find out what's going on. They can run cultures right there. They can give you your meds right there. It can really streamline the process and take a lot of the guesswork out of it. So if they have that, that's fantastic. Like I said, not every vet has it, especially smaller practices. It's not as common, but it's something you could look for. And it's something that I really like because, especially in a multi-dog household, they always keep a running tab of what your dog has had, and all vet offices have that record. But the pharmacy, you can call the pharmacy directly that they have there, and the pharmacy will check with the vet, make sure they can fill the refill, and it'll be ready for you, which can save you time and headaches, trying to play phone tag. For me, when I walk into a new vet clinic, I'm looking for cleanliness, kindness, and feasibility. You can always ask, what they charge for different things to get a feel for their pricing system. And then, I don't always recommend going for the cheapest price, because sometimes there are extenuating factors around that and you don't get the best service and your dog doesn't necessarily get the best care. I'm not saying low cost facilities do bad work. I worked at a non-for-profit and we were an excellent staff, but that's kind of atypical. So don't be afraid to ask about prices, get a feel for the staff, get a feel for the cleanliness, and always check the back and see how the animals are doing back there. Keep in mind they're probably sick. A lot of them are coming out of anesthesia, so they might be a bit groggy, but do they look completely overstressed? Because a vet environment is stressful enough, but if it's just constant drama back there, you're getting a negative feeling about it, you might hop to another vet and see what else is out there. This question comes from Daniel Greggs, and he is in Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, so Daniel wants to know how to pick a doggy daycare since he works during the day. He wants to make sure that his new puppy is well stimulated and kind of tired when he gets home. Okay, first thing, make sure your dog is already up to date on all his vaccines before you expose him to a foreign environment where he might not have an immunity built up yet. So go ahead and make sure your vaccines are up to date and age appropriate. Then, a lot like picking a vet, I always recommend kind of walking in when they're not expecting you and seeing what the general feel of the environment is like. Can you see through into windows? Are you watching the dogs interact? Which actually brings me to one of my most important things is if they're having doggy day play, which is kind of the whole theory behind doggy daycare, you want to ask how long they're out, if the group of dogs is both small and large or medium and large, or kind of how they balance that, and then how many people are out there at a time watching them, and how big is the group of dogs. If you've got like 25 dogs to one individual, the likelihood of one dog making a bad decision and setting off a dog scuffle, to put it politely, is much higher. And if there's only one person and 25 dogs, that's a lot to put on one person to try and split up, because typically once they get into it, it's not just the two dogs getting into it, then it's all 20, or at least the bigger half of that amount. So when I see a facility, I'm always looking for one that's got one or two people out there for every 5 to 7 dogs. Then figuring out, how long they're actually turned out, because sometimes they'll bring them in back and give them a break and then turn them back out again. And then, is it outside? Is it inside? What sort of interaction could you expect? And if they have a Facebook page or a Google site, you might want to go ahead and read the reviews, because all the good, bad, and the ugly are going to show up there, and that's a great way to find out what other people have experienced instead of getting the sunshiny, rosy version that you might get from just any facility, because they're not going to want to tell you the negative stuff. But a previous patron that stopped bringing their dog there for various reasons will have said something. So that's a good thing to check into too. Another question might be, okay, so what's the procedure if my dog is injured or if something happens? Are they going to call you? Do they call their own vet? Is the dog sent off site and then you have to meet them there? What is their process and procedure? Because every place is different and you don't want to hope for the worst, but you want to be prepared for it. You want to know that if something happens to your animal, you're going to get that phone call and they're going to let you know what's going on and what they're doing about it. And I like to know those things in advance. So this way I know, okay, I'm going to get a call or no, I'm not expecting a call. I would never go with a place that is not going to call me. I want to know what's going on with my dog, whether he's been in a scuffle, whether he's completely injured, whether he's acting funny, and things like that need to be calls. I never make specific recommendations on what sort of places to avoid. I just tell people what I would look for in a facility. I'm not going to call out any specific business and say, this is where I would avoid or this is where I would go, because that's going to vary from place to place and state to state. So you can look for these qualities in any facility and then tick things off your list that are positives. My biggest piece of advice is if it doesn't feel right to you or you feel like the environment might be overwhelming or it's just not what you expected, there are a million of these facilities out there, so don't feel like you're stuck with just the one. You can look around just like you would look around for a good vet, you can look around for a good doggy daycare, and then say there isn't one close to you. Another option might be a pet sitter. A lot of them have nice open spaces where they let dogs play. It's usually a smaller, less intense environment, and some of them send you videos of how the dog is doing during day play. It's more of a one-on-one experience, so that can be really appealing. And then the other thing is that you also will know the pet sitters. So say you're going out of town, they're already familiar with this place. They already know your dog. So you have the confidence of knowing, okay, they're going to be in good hands in my absence. And you don't have to find a separate pet sitter or a separate boarding facility. It's kind of like a one-stop shop sort of deal. I mentioned a little earlier that cleanliness is important, that it shouldn't have an odor. I'm going to add specifically for doggy daycares, when you look into those windows or where the dogs are being turned out to play, are there messes everywhere? Because if there are, you need to look elsewhere. There's no excuse except not monitoring the animals for having accidents all over the place. To me, that just shows poor management. So when I'm looking around, I shouldn't, maybe a mess, but not 5. And do the dogs that are there seem happy? Do they seem well adjusted? Do they seem like they're enjoying themselves? And especially if you have a small dog, I would always ask if they split up the play, because when you're talking about a puppy, they're really impressionable. So a bad experience can be the worst experience and it can really get ingrained in them. So making sure that they split them up according to size, not breed, but size, can be really helpful in handing off volatile situations and serious injuries. Okay, and our last question today comes from Lillian S. in Georgia. Lillian asks, how do I know where to find the perfect service dog? What do I look for? Where should I start? How do I know what breed's going to work? Okay, so that's actually a handful of questions in one, and I'm going to try and take each one at a time. First of all, a service dog, a therapy dog, and an emotional support animal are 3 different categories, and I don't know what you fall into, but if you're actually looking for a service dog, you need a dog that's going to have a really good work ethic. This doesn't mean that it's breed specific. There are some breeds that are more biddable than others, but to give you an idea, I have a mixed breed who's been my service dog for half of my life now, and he was just a mix I adopted. So just because you go with a breeder or just because you adopt doesn't rule in or rule out. However, drive does. Are they really bonded to you or are they more independent-minded? If they're independent-minded, that's probably not the right choice. Another thing that I always look for is, does the dog like picking things up? Especially if it's a mobility sort of situation where maybe you can't reach all the way down or you can't bend over or you need the dog to reach something above you. That will play into what size you get. That'll also play into what you need the dog to want to do. So if you have a dog that you need to retrieve things for you, well, obviously retriever mixes or retrievers would be a great option there. That includes golden retrievers, Labrador retrievers, flat-coated retrievers. All of those would fall into the retriever category. Then you need to start thinking about social aspects, because your dog's going to be exposed to 1,000,001 different places. And not all dogs can handle that level of intensity, and not all dogs can be nice in those sorts of situations. They are typically going to be leashed, and you are going to have trust in them and faith in them that if a dog were to run up to them and start acting aggressively, that generally your dog is going to ignore it. Now, I understand that there is always an act of God, and sometimes they might not be by the book, but generally you want to feel confident that your dog is going to remain calm, which will help you stay calm, which is one of the main reasons you might have a service dog. Psychiatric service dogs, their first priority needs to be to key into you when you're getting stressed and address things by tasking one at a time. Some dogs do deep pressure therapy. My dog does that. For both psychiatric alert and medical alert dogs, you might have them go into your bag and retrieve pills. So you really want a dog that can key into the signs so that you don't long term have to direct every single last thing they're doing. They kind of just know their job. I will caution you and tell you that training a service dog, a true service dog, is minimum a 2-year training process. It takes a lot of reinforcement all day, every day. Yes, they get breaks, but generally they're on the clock. So not only are you going to be exposing them to different environments, you're also going to have to really get their manners under control and put them under a microscope and make sure that they're responding the way you need them to, that they're respectful of new environments and not trying to lift their legs somewhere. I mean, in the very beginning, you almost have to, especially with a puppy, expect an accident here and there. But you need a really well housebroken dog that can go from place to place and know that they have to hold it until you've given them some sort of cue to relieve themselves, or a specific type of area to relieve themselves, so that they're not making a mess in Target, for example, or worse, the grocery store, because then it's a health hazard. As far as age, yes, I've seen dogs that are older learn how to be service dogs. It's not an impossible process, but there's a lot more that you're going to find out, and it might not be a match. They might not be suited for service work. Maybe they just kind of have their own thing going already, and they're happy being a companion dog, but they really don't want the work or the constant demand. So for that reason, I always try and go with a younger dog, because really quickly you can start getting them on your page, you can start training early, you can start putting the wheels on the road right from the get-go, and as things crop up, as they continue developing, as they're learning, you already know your dog. You're not trying to retrain or untrain previous behaviors. Now again, it's not to say you can't rescue. There are puppy rescues and there are adult rescues, and they can be suited for the work too. But you also have to know that before you got this dog, unless they've been in a foster situation where they've already been really well socialized and they kind of know their bells and whistles and the quirks that go with this dog, you could walk into something. I had one client who rescued a dog, lovely dog, super sociable dog. But when they were walking down the road one day, a semi tooted its horn and the dog went nuts. Well, that took her about 5 months to stop, because yes, he was scared, but his level of reaction was so volatile that caused problems when he would even hear a car horn after that. So things like that may not be as big of a factor if you start young, and as things happen, you can immediately derail the behavior before it's even fully fledged and a problem that you then need to reverse. As far as recommending specific breeds, I don't for a couple of reasons. While I understand that some breeds are really well suited to service work, like for example, Border Collies and Aussies can be fantastic for it, I've seen all different breeds do it. I saw a Great Dane doing it the other week. My dog is an Australian Shepherd Pit Bull mix, so he's very strong-willed, but he loves his job, and he's an excellent medical alert dog, and he knows deep pressure therapy, so he works on both sides of the fence. But specifically in his case, he wasn't ready to be a fully fledged service dog for the first 3.5 years of his life, because I was always tweaking things that he would do. Things to make him more manageable, things to make him less independent-minded, without being forceful about it. Just things to get him ready for the big job. He was kind of reactive. He was like a fear-reactive barker, so if something freaked him out, he would put up his hackles and then bark at it. So that took some time to reverse, about 6 months. But there again, he was a rescue. He was a puppy when I rescued him. And I had lots of time to set the groundwork that I needed for when he was older. And now he's 17 years old and still not fully retired. He loves his job. For that matter, I have a small breed dog, a French bulldog, who does medical alert. And he also does a lot of the anxiety alerting and tasking that you would look for. So he keyed into some of the things that my older dog was doing, and I really shaped and marked those behaviors a lot to make him want to do it. But the cool thing about him is he's really easy to teach something new to. He came from an excellent breeder. I worked with him from the very, very beginning, kind of like as an understudy to my dog. We had our basic obedience down in what felt like a week and a half, and he was housebroken in a week. So the more reinforcement you offer, the higher your chances are that you're going to get the product you want back. I mean, some people would not recommend a French bulldog. There is a good reason to kind of steer away from that breed in general, though, and that's because they are not great in the heat. And if they get overworked, they can get heat stroke rather easily, so that might not be your breed of choice, but I really am putting that out there because most people would not recommend a French bulldog, and I'm here to tell you that it worked out fine for us. If you're going to need a dog to really help stabilize you physically, then I always recommend something larger, something a little bit more stout built. I saw a Neapolitan Mastiff doing some service work the other day, and I had another class where a German Shepherd was doing something similar. So, if that's something that's important to you and you're going to need somebody to kind of stand still while you get up out of your chair and brace yourself on them, then you're going to need a larger breed, something with thicker bones. And if you have specific breeds, you might want to go with a breeder for the simple fact that you want to see if they've gotten their OFA testing, or if their parents have. Typically, depending on the age of the dog, the parents should be health tested, and anything that's hereditary towards the breed, like hip dysplasia, things like that, usually a good breeder will test for those things, so you can ask for that record and be a little bit more stabilized on knowing what the history is. There are also small breeds of dogs that can make excellent dogs for psychiatric support. Lhasa Apsos, if they're properly trained, end up being completely well suited to the job. I've seen so many of them that have done the job successfully. And then poodles, small and standards, can really fit the mold quite well. You have to work a lot on keeping their attention on you so that they don't become reactive barkers. But short of that, they're extremely intelligent. If you have allergies, you're less likely to be reactive towards a poodle than, say, like a German Shepherd. So again, it goes back to what you're going to need as an individual. Does size really matter, or are you just going to have your dog retrieving things? Are you needing a dog for psychiatric support? You need to very closely identify what your needs are. So this way, when the right dog comes along, you're going to be able to check each box and go, well, he does this and he likes this. And before you know it, you're like, this is an excellent candidate. If you're ever on the fence, though, I actually used to, as a service, offer service dog screens. And it was a really valuable process, especially to somebody who was green to having a service dog and they didn't really know what sort of things they were going to need, or what breeds or mix of breeds would have those sorts of characteristics, or what to rule out. If you don't need a dog to brace yourself on, then you're not as restricted with size. You can also do things with a trainer like temperament testing, and some trainers will go, like we did, to go evaluate the dog and give you an idea. If you already have a dog at home, is this a viable candidate? They can't say with 100% certainty if the dog is going to be suited to the work. And that's kind of the drawback about service work, is you have to kind of get into it before you know for sure. But they would be able to pick up on some of the things based on what your needs are, to kind of say, okay, well, this dog is ruled out and here's for these reasons, or I think this dog would make a good candidate for these reasons. I can't tell you how many clients I've had over the years that just weren't sure what to look for, and as a trainer and a behaviorist, I could very easily key into, okay, this dog's temperament is really good, their trainability seems to be really good, and so I know that that's a more viable candidate than, say, the dog that just tries ignoring me the entire consult. And just to reiterate, as far as where to get a dog, you can go to a breeder if that's your security level, and that just feels better to you and you want more of a history. You can also go through rescues and speak with fosters, and or even become a foster and start fostering a dog that you're particularly interested in, and see if it's a good fit. See if they're really interested in the work. See if they're applicable to what you're going to need. And if it's a good fit, great. If it's not, the dog's going to be really well trained and it's going to be a lot easier to home for the rescue. So you'd be doing a service even if the dog doesn't end up with you. Okay, and we have one more question from, I was just reading through, from Tyrese in Ohio. And he asks, what is the worst thing that you can do to your dog? To give you an honest answer, being angry. It never really gets you to your destination point anyway. The dog will end up looking super guilty and miserable. And when I say being angry, I mean anything from physically inflicting yourself on the dog in a negative way by like hurting them or slapping them or throwing things at them, to an overly angry voice. You know, some dogs are more sensitive than others, but I have never seen a client in all my years be successful when they got angry. And because the dog, when you terrify him or her, is losing trust in you, which that trust is how you really get him to come to your side of the fence and do what you ask when you ask. And for that reason, I always stay away from getting angry at the dog. Yes, you're human. Yes, days are stressful. But if you feel like the pressure is mounting, stop whatever you're doing and take a break. Go take some deep breaths, maybe go have a glass of wine, go watch your favorite show, disengage. Because anything that you try and teach a dog that is instilled in them through fear, first of all, I can tell you they're not going to be willing participants. And secondly, I'm going to tell you, you could get more bees with honey than with vinegar. You know, if you're not fun to deal with, they're going to try and work around that instead of with you. So I really think being angry and or not clear can be the most detrimental things that I'd see in a client from day to day. And these weren't bad people. They were just people that didn't know what to do. And so they were going based on whatever they'd seen or whatever they'd heard. And it was a completely polar opposite response from their dog that we would create by bonding with them, by showing them a new process and regime and that follow through that they were missing before. Because dogs know if you're serious and if you're not. But the way that you're not going to get from point A to point B is by scaring them or by being just generally difficult to be around. You know, if they kind of skirt around you, that means they've already got a memory that's negative. And it takes a long time to purge negative energy and negative feelings, especially when it comes to dogs. Even more so if it happens during their puppy and imprint period. And as a resource, you can always contact us here at the show. We're happy to give you some advice, some tips, some tricks. But if you want to find somebody right in your own hometown, go check into a positive reinforcement trainer. They'll show you how to build bridges instead of, set the olive branch on fire. And you can just get so much further in so much less time. And it's going to be an easy and enjoyable process for all of you. What right now could be a super huge emotional battle of wills and of who's in charge could be oversimplified and is super, transparent to your dog and easy to connect with them. And the pressure comes out. It takes all the guesswork out, because if you know what to do, you're going to have confidence in your skill set, which will power you forward with your dog, because they trust your trust. As long as you give them an opportunity to build it with you and you're doing it in a positive fashion, you're going to get so much further than you would have by focusing all on their negatives and not rewarding what you enjoy about them, what you want from them, what you value in them. So if you ever feel like you're getting overwhelmed and things are kind of spinning out of control, go reach out to a professional. That's what we're all out there for. There are so many great trainers out there that want to help get, you back on track, but they also are going to go and get their hands dirty. They're going to really take a look at your dog as an individual, and whether you're sending them to a board and train or in-home classes with you or a group situation, regardless, as long as the message is positive, the result will be positive as well. So thank you everyone for your questions. I was super grateful to get them and be able to address them. If you have any further questions, you can send us a message. Our Facebook is facebook.com/Dog Guru Podcast. And also, if you haven't gotten a chance already, go ahead and find us on iTunes. You'll recognize our emblem for Dog Guru, and you can rate us and review us there. And the higher our ratings, the more notice that the world takes, which is fantastic. We'll get more listeners. We'll get more people who are interested in the mission of this podcast, which for me is really providing people who need help and answers with positive guidance that empowers them and helps reach the problems and tackle the problems they're dealing with at home from somebody who knows them. You know, somebody who's worked with a client just like them, or from somebody who is really knowledgeable in what they've done and has, years behind them of experience. So as a resource, write in, send me your questions, let me know what you're struggling with, and let's see what we can do about it. So if you're enjoying the show and you like our content, go ahead and follow the directions below to rate us on iTunes. I promise you I'll be super, super grateful. And that's all for me today, everybody. This has been Victoria, your dog guru. Namaste.